right, welcome. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of ShatterCast. We are joined by the lovely Derek Whitmore, and of course, my wife, who is also lovely, Hannah. And we have a special guest by the name of Andrew. Derek, let me turn it over to you, and you can tell our audience everything that you know about Andrew.
Ooh, do we have enough time? Blackmail material. No, super excited to have Andrew here with us. He is working on an amazing game called Deliverance. I am repping the merch right here. You know, brand here. Got connected with Andrew, if I remember correctly. So Shatter, we were doing some stuff at a local gaming convention. Found out about this great guy, Andrew, and that he's working on this amazing game, Deliverance. And so contacted him, say, hey, can we get a copy? So he was great enough to send us a preview copy, was able to demo that at the convention we were at, and people loved it. Got a lot of great reviews. We actually talked about it a little bit on one of our previous podcast editions. And so contacted Andrew, said, hey, do you want to come on for an interview? And here we are. So Andrew, good to see you, man. Hey, do you want to maybe introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and maybe some of the interests you like as we get started.
Sure. First of all, thanks all for having me on the podcast. It's a real blessing to be here with you guys. And so yes, my name is Andrew Lowen. I am a father of 5 daughters that are all 8 years old and under, no twins, and my life is chaos. I run a digital marketing agency for small businesses out of San Diego, California. Been doing that for just over a decade, and I'm a huge nerd. I love gaming, and I couldn't be just a casual player. So I was a professional Hearthstone player, a semi-professional poker player. I have represented the US on 2 separate occasions in wrestling in Ukraine and Australia. I just try hard at all the things and have a lot of fun doing that. I'm a 3-stripe brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now. And so it's like wrestling just upside down. So much easier when the gravity's on your side, you know? But yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. I created this game, Deliverance, kind of was my brainchild of about 4 years ago, just over 4 years now. And the impetus for that was that I quit video games cold turkey October 1st, 2015. So I've actually not played a video game in about 5 years. And when you do that, you look to fill the void with things. And you know, I try, you know, I play hard when in video games and that kind of thing. And so when I started having more kids, it was like, I just can't be a good dad and have as many children as I want to have, I guess. And so I looked to fill that with something that I could also be a huge nerd and nerd out without, you know, taking too much time away to be good at it. And board games was such a natural fit. And then of course I can't just have a hobby. I have to be a designer now of a board game. So that's me.
Awesome, man. Yeah, at first I was going to say No Man's Sky didn't come out until 2016, so I wasn't sure why you quit gaming in 2015.
Yeah, I haven't played Breath of the Wild. I haven't played, I mean, there are so many great games that I'm like, I wish I could play that, you know?
Family comes first. That's awesome. How did you kind of answer this question a little bit, but what kind of shifted you from getting into the hobby and enjoying playing board games and wanting to be a part of that community to now want to create something for the community? Was it just the sort of like the logical next step in like pursuing excellence in all of your hobbies, or what were you thinking?
Well, not so much. It really came down to, I would play, as a Christian, I have this, I think all of us as Christian nerds have a battle that goes on within us about how much like is Harry Potter okay, or is whatever okay, right? And some people the answer is yes, and some people it's no, and they have their reasons for that. And I thought, I mean, I read all the Harry Potter books, and I read the Wheel of Time series, and I saw the movies of, various things and whatnot. And um, I, I just, I felt like, why isn't there a game out there that I just don't have to compromise anywhere? Like, I don't want to have to worry about is magic good or bad, because my wife actually just won't play games with magic. And for me, I put 30,000 hours into World of Warcraft. So, that's something that, obviously I'm okay with that. But
Relatable.
yeah, I mean, I just felt like, why isn't there a game that gives me absolutely everything I want without any compromise? Like, I don't want anyone to have to feel like they're compromising, but at the same time, I don't want to compromise in the feeling of the game and how awesome it is to play and how powerful I feel. And I want to sling lightning from heaven and, melt demon faces. And I want it to be done by the power of God so that nobody has a problem with it. And so I was just like, why isn't there a game that is like this? And I've since learned why there isn't a game like that. It's because that's extremely hard to do. Extremely hard to do. I have been told I'm going to hell at least half a dozen times for various elements of the game. And I have been told that I am a dirty hypocrite that needs to keep their awful religion out of, that person's hobby by, of course, the non-Christians. And so it's quite polarizing, and to really ring true in a way that resonates with people and also has some semblance of theological soundness, that's been very difficult. So it's been quite a journey.
Definitely.
Well, it sounds like this premise is pretty important to you, and you put a lot of thought into what goes into it. So why don't you give our listeners a little bit of like an elevator pitch of sorts of what this premise is and what it looks like?
Sure. So before the actual thematic introduction, I kind of look at Deliverance as an allegory for how, if it's not meant to educate per se, it's meant to be a game that is like a fun generator. We want to have it. That's like its purpose, right? But if it was to educate on anything, it would be to educate the Christian on spiritual warfare, that it's real, that you need to fight it, and here's how you do it. Sans taking a giant broadsword and swinging it into a demon, because we can't really do that. So it's an allegory for spiritual warfare. So the thematic, what's behind the story is that you play an angel, an elite angel in the army of heaven, and you've come down to this small little town called Fallbrook, in modern day Southern California, which is rife with demonic activity. There are demons everywhere, and for such a small place, it is caused a stir, and you need to figure out what is going on. You suspect that a former angelic brother or sister, a fallen prince, is commanding the demon armies from the shadows, and it's your mission to send that fallen prince to the abyss to wait his final judgment and to figure out what is going on in the town of Fallbrook and restore peace. So along the way, you'll have to protect the saints, because you're, of course, a guardian angel. It's your standing orders to protect saints, and but something strange is happening. It seems that the darkness from the human realm is bleeding into the spiritual realm and manifesting itself. And so it's going to be something you have to deal with in your quest to restore order.
So this is a cooperative game?
It is cooperative, 1 to 4 players against the game. And so you are going to be playing against the forces of darkness, which are controlled by the game itself. But it's not like Jumanji. It's not like you get sucked into it and you have to finish, or else you just unleashed the end of the world.
Right. I'm getting kind of some like Frank Peretti vibes here from the conversation. And so there's a lot of different biblical themes or concepts that could be turned into a board game realistically. So how did you decide on doing an allegory for spiritual warfare?
So, well, the first, I guess, in a when you deal with a Christian board game, it's kind of like you really only have 2 routes that you can go. You can go either historical or fantasy. And if you try to kind of blend the 2, it ends up being like basically what amounts to an educational game. Mm-hmm. So you either have to have a game that's set in the history of the world and talk about, and just have a game about like what happened. A great example of that would be Commissioned, if you're familiar with that game. It's a great one that just does such a great job from the historical perspective. And then there's the fantasy perspective, which is kind of speaks in between the lines of what the Bible says. Anything that, and of course you have your pitfalls on either side. If you get the history wrong, or if you get if you contradict what the Bible clearly says, like, let's say, Satan's a boss and you kill Satan. It's like, nope, that's not how it works. Like, that's not how the story goes. Right. So, so that's kind of your challenge there. But I decided to go fantasy because my wife made me go out on a run one day, and I like to think I'm an athlete, but I do not like to run at all. And I was just having a hard time with something, and she just said, I need to go blow off steam, so go on a run. And so I'm dying after like a mile and a half, and then my mind just like leaves my head and goes off somewhere, and I'm like a floating camera watching myself. And I just start thinking about, all the things. So there's Jude verse 9 talks about how Michael, when he contended with the devil over the body of Moses, dared not speak against him a reviling accusation, but instead said, the Lord rebuke you. And Jude was writing that like the Jews who he was writing to understood that, remember that time that Michael and Satan went at it. And I'm thinking like, no, like, tell me more about this, right? And so I was just wondering on that run, what that was like. Did they, have words? Did they fight with swords and, shields and spears? Or how did that happen? And so it just became a thing that entered my head. I feel like God planted it in my head. Like, I want you to wonder about this, and I felt like, if I were to design a game, it would just be such a perfect fit for that thing that I wanted, which was a game where I wouldn't have to compromise. And it's like, dude, if it was slinging fireballs by the power of God, then there's no problem for my wife. She'll play it. And, so it kind of started from there. It all started from there.
Awesome. Derek, why don't you jump in? We feel like I've done a lot of talking.
Sure, no problem. John mentioned Frank Peretti and This Present Darkness. Not sure if you're familiar with that.
Very familiar.
That's one of the great stories I love, and it reminded me exactly of when I was playing Deliverance. Was that an inspiration for you? Are there any other inspirational stories, where it's comic books, or even music, that kind of help you create kind of the world of Deliverance?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness are two novels by Frank Peretti, and they are both excellent. They did what I wanted, how I wanted the angels to be like. I wanted them to have influence on humanity, but not, be like, show up in, I can't remember what show it is, but there's like a detective works directly with Michael or Gabriel, like one of the, it's like a crime drama where, so anyway, I'm sure that some of your listeners will know, but I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted it to be like angels influencing without the direct knowledge of humans around them and whatnot. And I really liked how Frank Peretti's books did that. The one thing Frank Peretti's book did not answer, and if you look back through the book, no demon ever hit an angel with a blade. What would happen if a demon blade hit an angel right in the neck? It didn't answer that, because every angel ducked at the right time. But obviously there was fear there of getting hit or whatever. They had to block it, or they had to duck or whatever. And it just never answered that question. And so, it's just maybe interesting tangent. But then another source of inspiration, really at what type of scale and how epic I wanted it to feel, was a particular trailer for World of Warcraft. If you're familiar with the Burning Crusade,
yes,
it had
this trailer.
Yes. So there was a very, very popular anti-hero named Illidan Stormrage, and he's holding this skull, talking to it and talking about how, you think you've won, you think you've done this, you think you've done that, you think you're safe, you're not prepared. And then it kind of goes on, and you see the trailer, and then at the end, Illidan is holding this skull, and then he just beefs up and grows wings really quick, and he yells at the camera, "You are not prepared." and then it just ends like that. I was like that. I mean, you know, I was at BlizzCon when they unveiled that, and I think I freaked out and you know, threw my underwear on stage and everything. You know, and
That was, oh man.
so more like my pocket protector. But it was just something that resonated with me as such a powerful moment, and I kind of got this idea in my head about Michael the Archangel when he said, "The Lord rebuke thee." I actually wrote I was inspired about 3 years ago. This a similar manner that I wanted to introduce Deliverance, and I wanted it to have this almost like a grim, dark. That's really the truth of the matter, you know, angels and demons and what happens. It's very grim and it's very dark, and it's got a very different tone than any other Christian product I've seen before. Book of Eli is probably the closest thing I can think of to a Christian story that's like kind of grim and dark, but still, you know, has great messages and whatnot. And so I thought about Michael the Archangel saying, "The Lord rebuke thee." And so that, you know, what we did was, I mean, I had a voice actor speak the part about, you know, 2.5, maybe 3 years ago. And then 2.5 years later, you know, maybe 6 months ago, I actually finished the trailer for that soundbite. So that soundbite, that clip that you know, maybe we could link in the show notes or something for your listeners, that 1 minute Deliverance thematic introduction, that thing was really inspired by that Illidan Storm Rage, you know. So.
I approve. I'm a big fan of that. I think that was probably the best expansion. And Liam O'Brien was the voice actor for that role, and he killed it. And so big fan. So +1 from me for that connection.
Super cool.
Well, obviously there's a lot of different types of audiences when it comes to premise. But when it comes to like mechanics and gameplay and things like that, what kind of player would you say this game caters to?
That's a great question. And so it caters to somebody, so the answer, I gave a talk to the Christian Game Developers Conference on this very thing, your target market and who will buy it, who will play it, and the thing that I want to make it, you know, me, I guess, as my, I don't know, my life song to the world or something, you know. So the cheesy answer that I'll expand on is a person like me. So I made it for people like me, and that would be the gamer that it was 20 and now is 30 something, that really wants that epic experience, but doesn't have the time, or now, you know, that MMOs and other games are just very common. It's hard to have that experience where you just realize the world is way bigger than what you thought it was, you know? And so I wanted it to appeal to those types of people. And really what ended up happening is it appealed very much to those types of people, but it also appealed to 2 other groups that I didn't expect. The first group are atheists. I was completely shocked at how non-Christians were so excited. They actually would say, "Wow, this is just like, you know, Greek mythology, but it's just Christian mythology, and I would love to play angels and you know, against demons and live in that world and whatnot." And so that was something that was very surprising and comforting. So half my email list are pastors and priests, and the other half are just, you know, Satanists and, you know, everything in between. And so that was very interesting. And the third group were Christians that were not gamers, that really wanted their gamer friends, family, kids, you know, that wanted to be able to relate to them on some level that was like meeting halfway. And so it was really, it's kind of become something that Christians are proud to say, this is a Christian product, and I can't wait to show this to whoever it is. So it's ended up appealing quite a bit to very new gamers. And actually, a lot of what I used to have for the characters, they all have 5 actions, and one of them is move, one of them is attack, one of them's prey, and they one of them's a heal, and every character has some semblance of similarity in that manner. But the way it used to be was we had like an advanced character, and then you flip over the other side and it was a simple character. And that was specifically meant to, simple character had higher stats, fewer skills and whatnot. And that was specifically meant to appeal to the non-gamer that was trying to play this. And what I found is actually it was always like a son or a friend or whatever, and they were like, "Oh, you need to play the advanced side. I'll teach you how." And it just was like I've been trying to really experiment quite a lot to appeal to the light gamer that really loves the theme. And so those are the three groups.
It's really cool.
So if you were to if you were to pick it's bound to happen at some point.
Yeah, ladies first.
If you were to pick like a category of mechanics, like say strategy game or trick taking or something like that, how would you categorize this game?
So it would be it's a tactical dungeon crawler. So you're kind of fighting through the forces of darkness and slaying demons left and right, and heavenly treasure equipment is dropping, and it's increasing your power, and you're leveling up and getting new skills and other things like that. So it's a dungeon crawl in that way, and it's a tactical combat game because it's dudes on a map. So you're playing, these little figurines, and you're moving them around and kind of positioning yourselves properly and that kind of thing. So it's a tactical dungeon crawl. Some people might call it like an adventure board game. I think that positions it nicely for some people, but I look at it more like a tactical dungeon crawler. So,
for some of the gamers in our audience, are there some games, although Deliverance is in some aspects very unique, are there some games that they might think it might be similar to, just so they can kind of get an idea? And then also, what are the different ways you can play Deliverance? I know we were talking about the skirmish and the also campaign mode. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So as far as games that it reminds me of, there's this. So Pandemic. Let's talk about Pandemic first, because it's cooperative. You're all working together, and you're fighting against this infection deck. So what happens in Pandemic, for those that might not be familiar, is you put these cards called epidemics. You slot them like partway through, like, at certain intervals, you have these cards that will come out and do something traumatic. And what happens is the cards coming out, represent like locations you put cubes of disease, and that's a bad thing. And then eventually one of these epidemic cards will come out, and it does a couple of bad things, but then it tells you, put all the cards that all the cities, all the locations that you've put cubes on, put all of those back on top of the deck. And what that moment does to a player, they think, wait, all the cities that just got infected are going to get infected again? Oh my goodness, I have to get to, whatever, Essen, because there are 3 cubes already and it's going to explode. And it just all of a sudden causes this mad amount of tension. And that is what the darkness deck will do in Deliverance. And I really love that feeling of chaos, and we're going to die, and oh my goodness, what's happening here? And, everything's fine, and then it's not, that's one of the things I really loved. Another thing, I guess, for the tactical combat. So games like Zombicide or Gloomhaven kind of have a little bit of a tactical combat element that I would say, dudes on a map, moving them around, using actions and other things like that. It's a little bit, so Gloomhaven would be closer as far as the amount of things that you're able to do on your turn. And what I really enjoy about Deliverance, though, is that it's kind of hard to alpha game Deliverance. And I tend to fight against being an alpha gamer and, telling people what to do. Pandemic is really easy to say, oh, Hannah, you need to go, to London, because if you don't, then we're going to get owned. So I kind of just played your turn. You know, it's like move, cleanse, disease, and whatever. And it's like, well, you know, why isn't he just soloing this? Because obviously that was the only right move, and that's kind of annoying, you know, when you have that experience. And so what Deliverance does nicely is there's enough. It's all public information. You know, all the players are working together, but there's a little bit too much that goes into what each character can do, each prayer card that you have, but you only have to worry about your stuff. So it's really easy. There are always at least two valid, meaningful decisions that you can make. And the alpha gamer thinks, oh, you need to do this, and oftentimes does not see the other option. And I see constantly see players saying, no, I'm going to do this instead. And what, you know, they tell me that as the game designer, oh, no, I'm doing this instead. And it was a good move. Like, oh, that's great. Well, then I'll change what I'm doing, or, you know, whatever. And I just haven't really found a game that quite encapsulates that is cooperative, but also doesn't have that alpha gamer complex. So, but hopefully those were a couple of examples.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, actually, because I think that's one of those things where, you know, people talk about this like on a film set. You know, you don't recognize the sound department is there unless there's a problem, right? And so with that aspect of cooperative games, I didn't even really think about that when we played this past week, because it just never came up as a possibility.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an issue out there, and it's something that I think about every time I've played Pandemic, because as a strategic player, it's really easy to do exactly what you did, kind of jumping in and taking everyone's turns, and that just never happened, and it didn't come up, and I wouldn't have thought of that. So I'm glad that you made that point, because you're very right about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because you know, I always have a hard time. You know, we played through Pandemic Legacy Season 1, and it was kind of hard to play through that because I felt like it was marriage counseling every single time. You know, it was like my wife and I were doing 2-player, and then it was like I was telling her what to do, and she was like, fine, you just play. I'm like, well, I mean, I want to enjoy this with you. I want you to enjoy it, and so I'm sorry, how can I be better at this, you know? And that's always a frustrating experience to I'm sure you as a married couple have experienced that. I would say probably the best marriage counseling game.
Well.
Yeah, there you go. Chronicles of Crime is one of the best, easy to alpha game, but also easy to fix. I really felt like it was the best positive marriage counseling that I've experienced in recent times. It's a really fun experience for 2 players. So, but anyway, yeah. So through Derek, what you asked about the ways you can play through a campaign, or you can play through a skirmish. So the skirmish would be you bring the game to someone's house for game night, and you all just want to play, to sit down and slice of demons, play a game. That is like a 1 to 2 hour experience, and then you've got you know, maybe like 2.5 if it's your first time ever playing 3 hours, maybe if it's rules and then learning to play it for the first time or whatever. But so that's kind of the way that you can sit down, choose your angel. You're going to level up in a different way each time. Like you have these talents that you're going to, you know, you have like, let's say 5 talents at, you know, level 1. You're going to draw 2 of them and pick one. And so you have a little bit of agency there, but there are 3 talents that you didn't even see. And then by the time you get to your fully leveled up, there are almost 10 talents that you don't even know what they were. You couldn't choose between them. And it makes players want to try again. You know, they want to play again and see what other options their character has, and, you know, and so I really like that. And then the campaign is a story that remembers what happened last time. So when you play through your first game, you get, you're going to level up and get to choose any talent you want. Let's say any one of those 5, you get to look at all 5 of them and then level up the one that you want. And so you kind of get to, by the end of the, you know, 12 to 15 game campaign, you get to build the character the way that you wanted. And you can even use, let's say, some talent combinations that are not even available in skirmish mode, which is really fun. And so it's kind of how you're able to play.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned being able to kind of want to play again because of that mechanic. And the other night when we were playing together, I felt the same way. And I think it's really cool that I was playing the Archangel Gabriel, and I wanted to play again so I could explore more about his character and see what other talents were and everything else. I think that's really cool because the replayability doesn't just come from wanting to play the other characters around the table, but from wanting to go deeper on my character. And to me, that breeds a much higher level of replayability, because of what you've been saying is, man, I can play this character several times before I've seen everything. And then there's X number of other characters out there that are the same way. So I feel like genuinely, like when this is released and I can get a copy on my table, like this is a game we're going to play several times. Really cool. Anyone else, anything else before I get going?
Wow.
I'm really weird. You'll get used to it.
I love it.
I'm still not used to it.
With marriage, and yeah, second guessing every day.
That's awesome. My wife too.